I remember turning The Sopranos on once and within 2 minutes nearly throwing a brick through the screen. I think that The Sopranos uses music incredibly well. I actually got more attention from one episode of The Sopranos than I did from 2 years of The L Word. Not to toot our own horn, but when The Sopranos was on, it was as good as any movie that was coming out in the theater. I think that goes for a lot of shows today. 24-foot and 20th Century Fox and Sky TV are not responsible for training the US military. It is not our job to do. To me, this is almost as absurd as saying, The Sopranos supports the mafia, and by virtue of that, HBO supports the mafia. John Ventimiglia, who was on The Sopranos, was in my first acting class and we have been friends since that time. Alec Baldwin was in my class back then, Young and Andrew McCarthy. If something sticks around long enough that it makes it to seasonal DVD release, I'll watch it. That's how I watched The Sopranos. The best of American television is thought-provoking, original, brilliant, exciting. From The Sopranos on, whether it's The Wire or Breaking Bad or House of Cards, they're fantastic pieces of art. I started acting in The Sopranos around 1999 and 2000. I did that for 6 years. That was quite a job, and I loved it. The way that Dickens structured his books has a form that we most readily recognize now from, say, the great TV series, like The Wire or The Sopranos. There's one central plot line, but then from that spin off all kinds of subplots. I had some experience when I joined The Sopranos in the last season. My character married Christopher, and everyone loved Adriana. I knew what it was like to join a very beloved, secretive show and following a very iconic character. I like to watch the Fox News Network. I like Nightline. I like to watch The Sopranos, of course. That is one of my favorite shows. Entourage is another one. I like The Shield. Our amour faux with The Sopranos is headed for long-term parking, like so many of its most memorable characters. We'll never see a show like this again. We're seeing TV series that are as good as movies were in the 70s and 80s, shows like The Wire, The Sopranos, and Breaking Bad. It's a cliché to say this now, but to me, The Sopranos is like Dickens. It's able to take this very focused look at something but make it epic and profound. I watched The Sopranos. I saw a couple of episodes of Mad Men. I loved Seinfeld. In fact, I got some CDs of Seinfeld. Seinfeld was hilarious. Oh, boy. The Nazi soup kitchen, no soup for you. I didn't watch TV from the time I was 18 till my mid-30s. And then I got a TV to watch The Sopranos. I realized, oh, TV is really interesting. It's people politics, people dynamics that make a show really good, whether it's Desperate Housewives or Lost, or The Sopranos. It's the people we've grown to love or otherwise. More and more, you're seeing television shows that are better than 99% of the movies out there. I mean, you watch something like the last couple of seasons of The Sopranos, which is some of the most sophisticated writing I've ever seen filmed and some of the best filmmaking I've ever seen, and it's a TV show. Being on The Sopranos definitely prepared me for the militant secrecy of Mad Men. My first proper credit was a small voiceover on an episode of The Sopranos when I was, like, 11 or 12. They're naughty, all those writers, they mess around with people. I know James Gandolfini got a bit fed up on The Sopranos. If he said anything in front of a writer, told them a story from his life, it could make its way into the script. I'm not one of these people who say how much better American drama is than English. I find it mostly too American, except for The Sopranos, which I think is the best thing. There's no mistaking the fact that some of the best long-form fiction out there now is in American television. The Wire and Deadwood and The Sopranos. I can stay in the bath for, well, the longest has been 7 or 8 hours. I get completely set up with my laptop so I can watch The Sopranos, put out some scented candles, music. I have a towel nearby so I can dry my hand to change the music or the TV. I make a little heaven for myself, and then I just refill and refill. One FBI agent told us early on that on Monday morning, they would get to the FBI office, and all the agents would talk about The Sopranos, having the same conversation about the show, but always from the flip side. The Sopranos, for instance, is arguably the best cable show of all time. They could have made a movie, but that show ended so perfectly, it would almost be a disadvantage to make a movie like that. Then again, if you made a Sopranos movie, people would be lined around the block to go see it. Working with HBO was an opportunity to experience creative freedom and long-form development that filmmakers didn't have a chance to do before the emergence of shows like The Sopranos. All the dramas I admire most, 6 Feet Under, The Sopranos, even when the scenes aren't laugh-out-loud funny, per se, there's a comic twist that gives the stories an energy. There was certainly less profanity in The Godfather than in The Sopranos. There was a kind of respect. It's not that I totally agreed with it, but it was a great piece of art. Personally, I don't think we could do such a show if we didn't get along. The subtext of all this is that we're women in a show, so we can't possibly get along. It's not like they write about The Sopranos like that. Like many other touchstones of 21st century pop culture, The Sopranos was hatched in the late 90s, predicting a future that never arrived. It was designed for a decade that would be just like the 90s, except more so, in an America that enjoyed seeing itself as smarter and braver and freer than ever before. I can't actually believe how good The Sopranos is. I genuinely am dumbfounded by it. It's like when you realize how good the Beatles are, and you think, how did they do that? The Sopranos was a very East Coast show. Heroes is more organically global. The Sopranos only reflected the tenor of how things are done in New Jersey. They didn't invent it. And I say that as a fan of both The Sopranos and New Jersey. The Sopranos all came down to the writing. I wouldn't have been on for as long as I was if the writing weren't so good. It's funny, I was a big fan of The Sopranos. It became kind of a threat to The X-Files in a way because they could play with language, character, and story in ways that we never could because of the limitations of network television. If I have to read another cultural studies analysis of The Sopranos, I give up. There's an awful lot of rubbish around masquerading as cultural studies. Very often at the end of The Sopranos you get the feeling that it's not under control, you should be very worried, and life is kind of really messed up at a lot of times. It leaves you feeling very disconcerted. That was kind of the point of it. The first thing I went out for was The Sopranos and I got it. So that's how it happened. I hate to say it like that because I wait for calls now. The Wire's definitely one of them. The Sopranos is one of my all-time favorites. Those are 2 big ones for me. I don't know anyone who curses the way they do on The Sopranos. Not in an Italian household. I never said the word hell in front of my mother. The Sopranos is filled with really retrograde humor. Bathroom humor, falls, stupid puns, bad jokes, infantile, adolescent stuff. But it makes me laugh. I really loved The Sopranos, but didn't have HBO, so someone would send me tapes of the show with 3 or 4 episodes. I would watch one episode and go, oh my god, I've got to watch one more. I'd watch the whole tape and champ at the bit for the next one. The government itself is running exactly like The Sopranos and they sit back and they make deals. And they say okay, I'm going to do this, France, you're getting the pipelines. HBO churn out some unbelievable stuff. They really got me with things like Band of Brothers. But you can't beat The Sopranos. I think that the difference between The Sopranos and the shows that came before it was that it was really personal. There had been a lot of dramas, a lot of really good ones, a lot of really bad ones, but they were always franchise shows about cops, or doctors, or lawyers. They weren't about the writer himself. When we were doing The Sopranos, I used to love that about it. There were rules, mafia codes you had to go by, but the code is ridiculous. It's a code among sociopaths. The Sopranos wardrobe people would sometimes go over there and just grab stuff off the racks, because BG has that style that never ages. It's like a 50s or 60s style. It fits me well. If you see The Sopranos, you're not going to be speaking in the Shakespearean English. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.